This is the Mark Dolan Way. Top tips for mind, body, and soul, some great life hacks, and my favourite products of the week. This show is available on all podcast platforms, or you can watch it. Just subscribe to the Mark Dolan Way on YouTube and join the Facebook group. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show. I hope you are very well. Lots to get through today. Time for a couple of products of the week. We haven't had one of those for a while, have we? And this is an amazing diet hack, and it will save you money, and it's healthy, and it's amazing. And it's tins of fish. So I have here Marks and Spencer Danish mackerel fillets in spring water. Tin fish is so practical because, how long does this last? When it's in a tin, this one is good until August 2026. Well, it's currently 2024, so that's not bad, is it? It's more or less 2.5 years shelf life. And by the way, 3 years in, you can still eat that, in my opinion. So tin fish is very, very long lasting. So it lives in the cupboard. No pressure to eat it soon. You've got your nutrition, haven't you? So tinned mackerel, tinned salmon, tinned anchovies. You're looking at omega-3 oils, which are very good for the heart and for the brain. You've got protein. I'm a big fan of having your tinned fish in either water, like spring water, or brine, and brine is simply salty water, or extra virgin olive oil. Those are the things that I would recommend that you have your tinned fish stored in. Not sunflower oil. We've got a whole episode about the problem with industrially produced seed oils. So therefore, nothing that's in sunflower oil or rapeseed oil, that's off the agenda. Olive oil, some things are stored in olive oil, which is not as good as extra virgin olive oil. It's kind of refined, but it's better than those others. So I will reluctantly accept olive oil, but I would enthusiastically welcome extra virgin olive oil. And of course, I'm loving the water and the brine. So that's it. Economic as well. Tinned fish is cheap, or it can be, if you go to the right place. Tuna is, of course, tinned. I'm a big fan of tuna. The only problem with tuna is you shouldn't have it too much because, sadly, there is mercury in it. Isn't that annoying? Because we've destroyed the planet, so we now have mercury in fish, and that's a toxin. Oh, no. But you'll be all right with a bit of tuna. So I have tuna once a week, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I think cost-benefit analysis suggests that once a week, I'm getting the protein and all the nutrition from tuna and how delicious tuna is. And then there's a little bit of toxin, but it's not going to kill you, I think. Whereas I think if you had tuna every day, 3 times a day, that's probably asking for trouble. But the good news is that smaller fish are lower in mercury. So things like anchovies are lower in mercury. Salmon, for some reason, is actually a big fish, but for some reason salmon is lower in mercury. The ones that are high are things like swordfish, cod, tuna, that malarkey. I think mackerel as well, unfortunately. But, the mackerel, again, is really delicious. And so I will tolerate a bit of that. But I have loads of anchovies and I have loads of salmon. Big fan of wild salmon. It's quite hard to get tinned wild salmon. But anyway, there you go. It's a great life hack. I actually sometimes have a tin of fish in my bag, in my rucksack, as I go about my day. And I might just suddenly get hungry. I could just open it and I can just do a little kind of chunk of a hit of anchovies. And the anchovies are really nice. There's a supermarket where I go where you can get a tin of anchovies. I don't know how much, what the volume is, but it's like a small tin. And that's £1. Knock yourself out. Happy days. The problem with tin fish is it's a little bit medicinal, isn't it? It's not the most glamorous food. But if you have it on its own, then that ties in with low carb eating. And this is a low carb podcast. Do go back to the earlier episodes to find out more about why low carb helps you lose weight and become healthy. And one of the hardest things when you're out and about doing low carb is trying to just get protein avoid carbohydrates from cafes and shops because everything is carbohydrate. It's all sandwiches and pasta and rice. So if you're carrying your own little supply of protein with you in the form of tinned fish, then you're going to be laughing. By the way, tinned meat is not bad either. I get like these sort of tinned chunks of steak, like beef, slow-cooked beef in a tin for a couple of quid. That's a lot of protein. And that goes in the microwave at work and it's tasty. Absolutely delicious. Have that with a slice of gluten-free bread. Knock yourself out. Live the dream. The other thing that's really nice, product of the week. No particular brand recommended, but a blow heater. Get blown. Get yourself a blow heater. Because I find, like when I'm in here, in this room, doing my pod, it's currently February and it's still cold. But it strikes me as much more economical and therefore environmental to have my little blow heater, which cost about £12 from one of those household shops. You know, the kind of shop, like a DIY place that sells screwdrivers and drills. They normally have a blow heater as well. And what I do is I plug it in and it heats the air very quickly. So the room is like instantly warm after about 3 minutes. I just keep the doors and windows closed. It's not a big room. I'm not going to give you the impression that this is a room with an amazing panoramic view of a summer meadow. It's a window and a door, and I keep both closed. I put the blow heater on, and it warms the air. And actually, what I did just now is I had it under the desk, and I was rubbing. No, I wasn't rubbing. There was no rubbing. Don't worry. This is a family show. No rubbing. It was a rub-free zone. I had it on, and I had it on at my feet because my feet were like blocks of ice. So it was nicely warming my feet as it warmed the room. Had it on for 5 minutes. I've turned it off now. The room is warm. And I sometimes do that at bedtime. We put the blow heater on for a few minutes, then turn it off and then go to sleep. And then what happens is that the room gets cold in the course of the night, but that doesn't matter because you're asleep then. And it's too late. You're asleep. It's done. So that's really good. So, because I find it quite hard to fall asleep in a really cold room. I can do it sometimes, but as a general rule, it's nice if the room is not ice cold. But the reason I recommend the blow heater is because if you turn on your central heating, it fires up the boiler, the hot water has got to go through pipes, you got other radiators that start heating up. It just doesn't strike me as very direct. It's certainly not very quick. You're not going to heat a room quickly with a radiator. So I don't bother with the central heating quite often, and I will just, as I say, that's it. You just heat the air in the room very quickly. The blow heater is not a profound deep heat for the room. Do you know what I mean? A much more consistent heat. Let's say you're going to be at home all day. Let's say you're working from home and it's freezing. The blow heater is not your friend because you would need to have it on the whole time. At that point, you do use the central heating because what the central heating does is it heats the radiator, which then stays hot and it sort of sends out and radiates this heat. And the walls of the room warm up and just the whole building gets warm. And that's the point of central heating. And even the fact that you've got pipes supplying water to different radiators that run underneath the floorboards, well, that heat will rise. So if you're at home for a prolonged period of time, you need the central heating. It's more efficient. But for a quick blast of hot air and a quick warm room, you go for your blow heater, which costs very little. The only thing I would say is they're a fire hazard. Don't leave it unattended. Don't let it be covered with anything. And away you go. So it's lovely to talk to you. I do hope you are very, very well. I think I'm well. I was wildly exhausted for the last podcast. I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't tell you at the time because, as you know, a big part of this podcast is that you just crack on with it, don't you? If you're not feeling right, you're not in the mood for something, you do it anyway. So honestly, I was not in the best shape for the last pod, but I churned it out and I hope you did not pay the price. But I'm feeling far, far more energetic tonight. And yeah, lots of things to talk about. I have a friend who we're going to call Sanjay. That's not his real name. His real name is Wilberforce. Let's call my friend Sanjay. And I saw him this week, and it was lovely. He opened up to me because he's got a bit of a relationship issue, Sanjay. He's kind of on the dating scene. He's ready. He's sort of mid-30s, and he's ready to settle down. I feel like he's played the field, he's had his fun, and he's ready for something more long-term. So he's been going on dates, and I don't think that they've been all that satisfactory. But he told me about a situation where he's got an ex-girlfriend who he's kind of back in touch with, who he really likes. Like, really likes. And what happened is that 2 or 3 years ago they were dating, that she had a complicated love life because she was dating him, but then she had like an ex who was really annoying and still quite ever present in her life. And then there were a couple of other dodgy ex-boyfriends. And he felt like if he really had a long-term relationship with this person, with this woman, with this lady, that somehow, especially that one particular ex, would always be a feature of his life. It would be an issue for him. And he's like, I don't know whether I want to go out with someone and then inherit the ex-boyfriend and all of the complications and politics that go with that. The baggage. It didn't seem like it was a clean break for her and the ex. I don't mean that she held a candle for that ex anymore, but I think there might have been. I think that this lady has a child with him, so she therefore has to have some kind of relationship with him because they're co-parenting. I think if memory serves, I think that might have been the issue. But for one reason or another, the ex is still on the scene. My friend wasn't happy about that, and so he ended it. Well, 2 or 3 years on, he regrets it. He regrets ending it. And I said to him, maybe you were overthinking it. You were worried too much. You should have just given it a go and see how it pans out. He said, yeah, that's the thing. He really regrets it. He's been in touch with her recently. Still got feelings for her. Complicatedly, she's still got feelings for him. OMG. So it's hard. And we've all been in that situation, haven't we? And now, wait for it, she's with someone else who she's not even that into. But she can't really get out of it because she's just bought a property with this guy, this other guy, not Sanjay, this other guy that she's not that into. So she's not married to this other guy, but obviously if you buy a property with someone, that's a bit like a marriage, isn't it? Don't you think? It's as good as, let's be honest. Because if you break up, it's complicated because there's this property. What are you going to sell it? You're going to split it in half? You're going to cohabit in there? What are you going to do? So it's all very unfortunate because his strong feeling now is that he really likes her and he made a mistake. But what I'm just going to say to you is what I said to him about life generally. And it's two things. One, the Stoic principle, and there's a whole special program about Stoicism on this podcast if you go back. You know what I'm going to do at some point, by the way? I am going to write down myself a glossary of topics so that if I mention Stoicism, I can say that's episode 7. But at the moment, I can't do that. I'm very naughty. This show hasn't got the systems yet. It needs it. So we will get to that, I promise you. Episode 57, by the way. That's not nothing, is it? Wait till we get to 100. Do you think I should have a guest for 100? I think so. But it's got to be someone pretty damn good because it's a show that doesn't have guests. So if there's going to be a guest, it's got to be Paul McCartney. Do you know what I mean? I think so. Elton, obviously. We'll put a bid in. Put a bid in for Elton, see how that comes out. Who else would you like to have on the podcast? Barack Obama, be quite interesting. Donald Trump, for the sake of balance. Joe Biden, could be. That'd be a slow interview, wouldn't it? A lot of editing. I wouldn't want him expiring on my podcast. I'd have blood on my hands. Do you know what I mean? You killed the president. Well, I didn't really kill him. He killed himself with old age. Bless him. So, Nah, I don't think I would get a politician. They're all boring, aren't they? I'd go for an artist like McCartney, like EJ, Reginald Kenneth Dwight. He wouldn't do this podcast because it's not big enough yet. Yet. I think I'll get Elton on episode 1000 when I've taken you with me all the way to global superstardom. Anyway, more on that later, more on episode 100, but we've got to do something special, definitely. Maybe a live show. What about that? Would you come to a live show? A live pod? Come on. Now you're talking. I beg your pardon. What? So, my lovelies, where were we? Where were we? Oh, I'm so naughty because I just started on something, hadn't I? And I got myself distracted with talk of episode 100. Talk about running before you can walk. Oh, yes. So my friend and his issues. So, Sanjay. I told him two things. One, I gave him the Stoicism idea. There is a tradition, an ancient tradition called Stoic or Stoicism. Stoicism. A Stoic is someone that practices Stoicism. And it's very, very strongly principled in the idea that you have no control over the past or the future. The past is behind you. So there's no point having regrets about the past or nostalgia. And there's no point having anxiety or worries about the future. The obsessive focus of Stoicism is that you work out the difference between the problems that you can do something about and the problems that you cannot do anything about. You've got to, the hard work goes into identifying each problem and seeing what you can fix and tackle and what you can't. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine that you're unhappy in your work. You can put your CV out and look for another job and network, but you can't quit your job and do no other job because you have bills to pay. So that's the difference between things you can control and things you can't. And if you're not successful getting the other job, you are stuck with the job that you hate because you've got to eat and you've got to put a roof over your head. So that's out of your control. And it's very liberating because we spend a lot of time brooding over things that we have no control over. And that is the big problem. So therefore, I gave my friend the Stoic principles and I said, listen, the past is the past, okay? 2-3 years ago, you ended that relationship. You can't go back. You don't have time travel. It's done. So just don't brood on it. You know, he's losing sleep. He's clearly stressed about it. It's like, it's done. It's in the past. It's behind you. It's out of your control. Forget it. Let it go. And he appreciated that. And of course, you know, anxiety about the future and will I ever meet anyone? Again, that's out of your control. Just do what you can do today. And I think he and I both came to the conclusion that what he can do in the now, where you have got control, is just have a friendship with this person, with this lady, and then who knows where it goes. The door is open. You know what I mean? They can be friends, and let's see what happens. Because obviously if he cuts her out of his life, you know, they're kind of friends now again. If he cuts her out of his life, then he's going to curtail that opportunity. The only sort of little insurance policy I put on that, I did do a flip side to that. And I want to say to you, a lot of you who are in a relationship that's not great and you're desperate to get out of it, or you've ended a relationship that's not perfect and you're finding it hard to move on, there does come a cutoff point where you maybe need to walk away and not speak to this person for 6 months or a year, just so that you can get this person out of your head. Because I said to my friend Sanjay, you don't want to be thinking about this woman for the next 10 years, you know. So if it looks like it's not going to happen and it cannot be revived, I do think you need a bit of a cutoff, and that might involve not speaking to her. Because the problem with the friendship thing is, okay, that's nice to still be friends and everything, but then it means every time he sees her, it all comes flooding back, and the romance and the love and the what if. So it's a tricky one. So there's an argument he's got to decide now. There's an argument to keep this person in his life and keep that door open. Or does he just go, look, I need to move on and I'm never going to move on as long as I'm in regular contact with this person? If you do the latter, by the way, it sounds really cruel, doesn't it? If I say, don't speak to someone for 6 months or a year. And by the way, I don't mean ghost them and blank them. I mean that you talk to them and you say, listen, for me, the only way I can move on is if we have a bit of a break and we don't have much contact, if that's all right with you. You tell them your methodology and your thinking. And then maybe after a couple of years, then you're a bit more relaxed about seeing them again because you're over it. Do you know what I mean? You're over them. You've moved on. But whilst they're still in your life, it can be quite hard to move on. I've certainly had that with exes where a relationship ends. We both found it easier to just proper separation for a good long chunk of time. And then you can have a cup of tea and be pleasant and cordial. And then that's lovely it. But the idea of a big, strong, powerful relationship and then it ends and then you're immediately friends and see each other every day. Good luck with that. So my friend, I've told him that. I've given him the stoicism thing, given him the kind of live in the moment thing, tackle the problems that you have control over and ignore and accept the problems that you don't have control over. And then there's another thing. And I said this to him. And this is from me, by the way. This is not some other principle. This is just my advice and my life experience. He's furious with himself because he really likes this girl, but he ended it. So he just thinks he's the biggest idiot. It's like, what was I thinking? And I said, listen, I think you're being too hard on yourself. I think that when Sanjay ended that relationship 2 or 3 years ago, I think that he was following his gut instinct. It didn't feel right. It wasn't right. You had the ex-boyfriend. You had the other weird boyfriends. And his gut told him that this wasn't going to, he wasn't feeling it. He liked her, but he ended it. So I'm saying, mate, you followed your instinct. You got to trust your gut instinct. And it could well be that you were right. And also that maybe you weren't ready for a relationship. Maybe it was an excuse to not settle down because you actually, deep inside yourself, you weren't ready. And the reason why you're now having these feelings of love and all this sort of pining for this person is actually because now you are ready. And because she's with someone else and she's bought a house, probably the best thing for you to do is zero out the scoreboard, move on, and go out there and find somebody else that isn't in a relationship and have a complicated situation to unravel. But I said to him, it tells me that you followed your instincts. I think you should just trust your instincts at the time. You're looking back on it. It seems like a mistake. I don't know if it was, because I'm not sure your gut instinct is ever a mistake. And the other thing is you can't change it anyway. It's your journey. That was his journey. His journey was to end that relationship. Maybe it was a mistake and he was supposed to make that mistake. Yeah? So I want you, the Sanjay story, it's not about Sanjay. It's about you. Because I want to say to you with regard to things like regrets of you messed up a job interview, you went out and got drunk the night before, or you messed up a relationship, or you did this, or you did that, you made a mistake at work. And well, you know what? These things happen, and maybe it was for a reason. Maybe you went and got drunk and then did a bad job interview because you didn't really deep down want the job or you weren't ready for that responsibility yet. I mean, I got some really big TV opportunities very early in my career. I was not ready. I said no to a couple of big things because I just knew I did not have it in me. Isn't that amazing? I said no to a couple of big things because I just thought I'm going to die on my arse if I do that. I'm going to struggle. So I said no to some big stuff. Now, looking back on it, a couple of years later when I was broke with no work, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Well, a bit like my friend Sanjay, my gut instinct said no, not now, not yet. Your time will come. So there you go. That's my little story about my friend. I'm sure he's going to be fine. And I'm sure you're going to be fine too. But forget about the regrets. Seriously. I mean, by all means, learn from the things that you regret. You don't repeat them. Okay. That's what we always say on the show, isn't it? Every mistake once. But not dwelling on things of the past. what's done is done. Seriously, and possibly for a reason. Lots of other bits and pieces to tell you about. I'm a big fan of the Chris Williamson podcast, which is called, what's it called? Genius Human or something? Let's have a quick look. It's easier if I just look it up, isn't it, my lovelies? This guy is a bright button. He is a former club DJ and male model and reality star turned self-help guru. But I need to find the name. Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson. And he had Jimmy Carr on. He's a fine comedian and a great thinker as well. And Jimmy was talking about comedians, and he was talking about how comedians are on stage and they do jokes, and they might not necessarily be telling jokes about themselves, but there'll be some element of the humor, some element of the joke which reveals something about the comedian that even the comedian isn't aware of. So I could do a joke about, I don't know, married life, or a joke about going shopping or something like that. Anything, a joke about anything. We're completely made up, like a made up, not true joke, which is there to make people laugh. But you are giving in that joke, because that's come from your imagination, there will be some DNA in there of truth about you that even you don't have control over. Because the joke has come from your head, like your subconscious. It's a bit like a dream or something. There's bound to be something in there which is revealing. And I've heard writers talk about how, I think it was Sue Townsend who wrote The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, which is an absolute classic book for all ages. Really hilarious and very moving. And she said she was horrified by how much authors actually reveal of themselves when they write. And comedians do it too. And Jimmy Carr put it very well. He said, we leak. We leak. So in other words, you think you're watertight, but you are actually leaking. And what I would say to you in your life is go with the leak. Leak away. Let your essence suffuse everything you do. And the other big thing about the we leak, it means that there's no point trying to cover stuff up or have a persona or pretend to be something or somebody that you're not. Because the truth will out. Because we leak. So therefore, if you're like authentically yourself all the time and honest and straight and direct, then leakage won't matter, because there'll be stuff leaking out which is what people know about you anyway. So there's no surprise there. What's not good is when you have someone that pretends to be really lovely and stuff, and then they're just really unexpectedly nasty. It's horrifying, isn't it? It's truly unsettling and unnerving. I had one or two friends at university that just had a completely different side to their character. It was maniacal and terrifying. I couldn't be close to someone like that, because I don't know when this is coming, this blitzkrieg, this storm of rage or whatever. But then you've got the other people whereby, all the good and bad stuff about them is just worn on the lapel. It's public, it's out there. Haven't you had that with sort of bosses who are like maybe a bit difficult and a bit not that nice? But it's like you really know where you are with them. And there are no surprises. It's like, Barbara, she's feisty, she's tough, she's a perfectionist, she's impatient, but it's all out there. But there's no nasty surprises from Barbara. Barbara is, we've seen the good stuff, we've seen the bad stuff, and we know what we're dealing with. There'll be a lot of people that will be very invested in Barbara, and they'll trust her, even though she's rough around the edges. She's a rough diamond. She's prickly. She's spiky. You know what you're dealing with. I've had some difficult bosses, but I knew what they were like, and I didn't have to be afraid of anything. I mean, you certainly had that with, have you ever been in a situation where there's been a crisis and something's gone very badly wrong, and you find out who your friends are? And it's often the people that you thought were really lovely and really loyal that weren't. And then there's other people who were like never perfect, maybe a bit annoying. And they're the ones who were there for you. They didn't let you down. They came through. The people who were not perfect and maybe not that great, who you weren't exactly wildly fond of, but they've just, they showed up for you in your time of need. That's what happens when there's a crisis. People find out who their friends are, and it's shocking. The kind of people that throw them under the bus is always a surprise. It's a bit like the mass murderers. When the neighbour says, oh, he always kept himself to himself. But I thought that was a very nice bit of language from Jimmy Carr. We leak. And it's very true. And leak away. Enjoy the leakage. Right, let's talk about distance. Human beings are very on top of each other, aren't they? And that can be very good. And of course, when it comes to love, it's lovely. It's all cozy. You love each other. But I certainly found early on in my key number one relationship of my life, there were a few times when we had the most explosive rows. And it's because we'd been on holiday together and not apart for 5 days. We weren't used to it. And it drove us absolutely up the wall. Just like outrageous. They were getting on so well. Everything's great. And then 5 days together non-stop, we were ready to bite each other's heads off. So we learned very quickly in that relationship to engineer space. So hypothetically, let's say we were going on a holiday for a week. Then every so often, let's say, I don't know, it's Tuesday, we're in the hotel having breakfast. And I'd say, listen, maybe I'm going to go for a run, or shall I meet you at lunchtime? Or, you know that art gallery that you're not interested in seeing? I am quite interested. So can I go to that? You do your thing and we'll meet later. And you can engineer this separateness. And it's a really, really good thing to do, because then you miss the other person, you get a break from each other, and then you're really happy to see each other. But if you find in a relationship that there's no space and you can't breathe, engineer some separateness. All right? You don't have to be like Siamese twins. This is what happens to bands like the Beatles. The Beatles were just in each other's pockets 24/7 for almost 10 years. And by the end of it, they couldn't stand each other. And it all fell apart because they didn't have the space. And actually, if they'd had the right management, then they could have engineered more breaks from each other. Are you ready for the Elton John story? Of course you are. He writes with Bernie Taupin. Bernie Taupin writes the words and Elton writes the music. They live on different continents. So even though they are famous collaborators and have a deep, deep friendship that goes back over 50 years now, they only see each other a few times a year. And the lyrics, when Elton's writing, the lyrics come through, I'm guessing, on email now. In the old days, it was a fax machine, and before that, it was the post. But they've got that separateness. Well, they've been together 5 decades more. Never had an argument. Why? Because they have separateness. They're together, but they're separate. There's space. If they were in the same city, in the same recording studio, lived together, God knows what else, they would have broken up ages ago. So separateness is a really good thing. I have it with my colleagues at work. I've got one particular marvelous, let me tell you, I've got a dream team. I've got brilliant, brilliant colleagues. And actually, the way my show works is that I have revolving teams. So I get like a bunch of people who'll do like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the following Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's a different team. And they revolve. It tends to be that they get 1 week on, 1 week off with me. So they've got these teams and they work with me twice a month. And then 2 teams working with me twice a month covers the 4 weeks. And at first I wasn't happy about it because I thought I want some consistency on the show. One group, one team, a well-oiled machine. But I realise that the genius of the show, the special sauce, is the variety of colleagues that I have and the turnover. And the reason why is because they do 3 shows with me, really intense. That's 5 hours of live TV. And by the end of it, I've got no doubt they're sick of the sound of my voice, sick of the sight of me. But then they don't see me for another 2 weeks. And it means that they can have a break from me and, dare I say it, maybe miss me slightly, have to work with other people who aren't nearly as delightful. And then they come back and then they're pleased to see me, and I'm pleased to see them. It's like, hey, how are you? How have you been? How was last week? Missed you last week. What's going on? What's the news? What's the gossip? So it's always fresh. And then creatively it's good because I have different people with different opinions, different brains, different backgrounds, different perspectives working on the show. So you've got a weekend of shows where you've got 3 or 4 people and they have their input. And then the following weekend, it's a different group of people. Well, they're going to shape the show differently. Same host, same presenter, but different people guiding and shaping the show and producing it and outputting it. It's really healthy. So we get on really well because they're not sick of me and they will never get sick of me. It's not bad. It is not, which is why I think in some ways, although I've got mixed feelings about the whole 4-day working week or 2 days working from home, I think it's difficult in some ways for accountability and stuff like that. But it does keep it fresh for people. And then when they go into the office, it's a novelty and it's a buzz and it's nice to see each other. So the big overall theme of this is about separateness and the value and healthiness of a bit of separateness. Key to that is that you're comfortable on your own. And that's a terribly important life skill to develop. And if you're not good at being on your own, I want you to practice once a week. Take yourself off to a cafe and just sit there with a cup of tea on your own and a newspaper or your phone. You can read your phone, whatever it is, but practice being on your own and enjoy it. I can recommend an excellent book called Alonement by Francesca Spector. Alonement, it's a word. It's her word. She's got a podcast, I think, of the same name. And it's about celebrating being alone and being by yourself and how that is a superpower and how it makes you then enjoy being around people when you are, and it makes you better company. Because you don't want to be around people who are needy, who always have to have someone with them. You need that independence, that emotional and spiritual independence. It really is a superpower. I was the youngest of 4. My parents were very busy, and my brother and sisters were a bit older than me. So I wound up being on my own quite a bit growing up, especially when they'd gone off to uni and all of that. And I was a bit of a loner, but in a good way. And I just got used to my own company and to entertaining myself. And it's a really good thing. So if you're not good at that, practice it once a week. Just have a chunk of time, 3 hours, where you're just on your own. You can go to the park and eat a sandwich on the bench and read a book, or just go for a walk, go to the movies, anything, but just tap into that. And you'll find it makes you better to work with, better to be in a relationship with. You're more self-possessed. You have time to think. You have space. It's really good. And then just this final thought about separateness, and it's the excellent sleep expert Matthew Walker. I think he's Professor Matthew Walker. Excellent sleep expert. Got a book out about sleeping, which I think is called Why We Sleep. And he talks about a bedroom divorce. And it's the idea that if you're in a relationship, if you're lucky enough to have a spare bed or more than one bedroom, if your partner can be in the bedroom, and then if you can be in the spare room or maybe even on a mattress in the living room or whatever it is. But he talks about the merits of sleeping in a separate bedroom for better sleep. And he talks about it as a bedroom divorce. I don't think you need to do this, by the way. And who the hell has got rooms to spare? But it's definitely useful if your partner snores or the way that they sleep is disturbing you. And I think he said it doesn't seem to affect your intimate life, because it seems like that happens anyway. So that's good, isn't it? So you don't have to worry too much about that. But a bedroom divorce. Of course, in Victorian times, men and women did sleep separately. Winston Churchill was famous for sleeping in a separate room to Clementine, his wife. And he would occasionally, with a fountain pen, write a beautifully handwritten note on excellent, lovely, thick paper with his fountain pen, inviting her to join him in his chambers, and the little note would be slipped under the door, and he'd either get a response or he wouldn't. And isn't that cute? But yeah, if you've got the resources and if your partner is affecting your sleep, the bedroom divorce, an interesting thought. Listen, folks, lots more stories to get through next time. On next week's show, Yeah, I'm going to talk about being straight and direct with other people, about the importance of truth, the importance of acknowledging people, some top tips on dating, and the importance of systems. So there you go, all of that to come. Maybe I could just leave you with this, which I just heard on a radio show a while ago, and I wrote it down because I thought you'd like it. I don't have to explain it, do I? And it's this: start when you suck and never give up. Start when you suck and never give up. So in other words, if there's a thing that you want to do, professionally or creatively, or romantically, or spiritually, or physically in sport, God knows what it is. Let's say you want to become a stand-up comedian or a chess player or a playwright or a sprinter or a lay preacher or anything, right? Whatever you want to do, entrepreneur, accept that you will be rubbish at the beginning and embrace that. Own the fact that you will be rubbish. Start when you suck and never give up, and enjoy being rubbish, because all the great people were. Have a great week. Go and smash it. Enjoy a bit of personal space this week for yourself, a 3-hour chunk between now and the next show, and I'll see you next time. Please give the show an honest review. Tell your friends, tell your family, and I'll catch you in 7 days' time. Lots of love. Bye-bye.